Welcome to the Enlightenment Podcast to our listeners and viewers from wherever you are tuning in the world. Here we engage in meaningful conversations, we hope, about Palestine, offering some insight and context that is often missing from mainstream legacy media, while also celebrating the rich traditions and culture and history of Palestine and Palestinians. Today, we are very excited to be joined by Dr. Marwan Muasher, a distinguished Jordanian diplomat and scholar whose extensive career has been dedicated to advocating for democratic reform and justice in the Arab world. Marwan, welcome to the Enlightenment Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. Before we begin, I just wanted to do a quick recap of the last week and to acknowledge the ongoing inhuman situation in Gaza at the moment. It's hard to know where to start. A 6-year-old girl was burned to death by an Israeli airstrike while the world watched on. Her name was Warda. Dr. Najjar, a pediatric surgeon who spent her life saving children's lives, a mother who left to go to the hospital to treat other children, came back to find 9 of her children dead in a fire and had to identify their charred bodies. These were children ranging from 9 years old to 6 months old. And perhaps Gaza's youngest social media voice, 11-year-old Yakin Hamad, was killed in an Israeli airstrike, 11 years old, on May 23rd in Gaza. Known for her humanitarian-themed videos and her work with her brother through the UWENA organization, Yakin had over 106,000 followers, and she used her platform to share survival tips, distribute aid, and to highlight life under occupation, siege, and now genocide in Gaza. 18,000 children have been killed to date by the Israelis, and these, of course, were lives filled with a future and hopes. And on May 27th, after 3 months of Israeli-imposed starvation, the Israeli occupying forces lured Palestinians into a US-Israeli aid site, distribution aid site in Rafah, and then they opened fire on a crowd of starving Palestinians, killing at least 3 people and injuring 48. The UN condemned the incident, stating that most injuries were indeed caused by Israeli gunfire. To date, there are over 54,000 dead in Gaza, not counting necessarily those under the rubble, 123,000 severely wounded, for whom life will never be the same. Anyway, there's no segue from that, but I'm happy to say that we can talk about the future a little bit, how we got here and hopefully how we get out of here with our guest. Marwan Muasher is a seasoned Jordanian diplomat and political reformer. He served as Jordan's first ambassador to Israel following the 1994 peace treaty and later became foreign minister and deputy prime minister in Jordan. He also served as an ambassador in the US. Currently, Marwan is vice president for studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, overseeing research on the Middle East. Marwan is also the author of the Arab Center, The Promise of Moderation, The Second Arab Awakening and the Battle for Pluralism, where he advocates for inclusive governance and democratic transformation in the Arab world. His work consistently emphasizes the importance of justice and dignity for the Palestinian people. Hanan, you've known Marwan for a long time. Tell us a bit about the background between you.
Yes. So Marwan and I were friends growing up in Amman, and Marwan was always very interested in advocacy, social justice. He even, I don't know if you remember Marwan, he even formed a small group for us to meet at his place weekly to discuss social responsibility and world affairs. And he's also very good friends with my cousin Rani Atallah. They worked together in the past. And his wife, Lean, is also a dear friend, and she's a Palestinian. And also to remind you, Shamim, when you're doing research on I Can't Think Straight, the novel, which became a feature film afterwards, Marwan spent time with us. He was foreign minister at the time. And you even based one of your characters on Marwan's gentle, lovely personality.
There you go. Lots of claims to fame.
So Ahlan Marwan, and always good to see you and welcome. And let's dive in if we may. So you grew up in a region facing constant tension from Black September to regional wars. And later you became the first, as Shamim said, the first Jordanian ambassador to Israel, navigating diplomacy in a very contentious area of the world. So how did your early life and career really and experiences shape your understanding of justice, resistance, especially in relation to the Palestinian struggle?
I was part of an effort then, Hanan, to try to bring about a just settlement to the Palestinian question. Not that any settlement is just, but we were trying at the time to end the Israeli occupation, to establish a Palestinian state, and hopefully to have people move on with their lives. It never materialized. The Israelis, in my view, were never serious about ending the occupation, never serious about establishing a Palestinian state, and never serious about giving Palestinians equal rights. I think my time, particularly when I was ambassador to Israel, where I toured the whole country, historical Palestine, and got to know the people who stayed on the land, the Palestinians who stayed, and had to resist indiscrimination, injustice for a very long time until today. And, slowly it dawned on me that we cannot pursue a solution that is based on two states without also insisting on a rights-based approach. If the two communities do not enjoy equal rights, we will never arrive at a sustainable peace. The problem with the two-state solution is that it was being pursued while settlements were being built, while the very notion of separating the two communities became impossible. And that has my frequent visits to the Palestinian community that stayed on their land has shown me, the importance of people not accepting to live in injustice, to live under discriminatory rules. And today I'm a very ardent supporter, not of the shape of a solution, whether it is one state or two states. That's something that I leave up to the two communities to decide. But I insist on equal rights. If we do not, have equal rights as our point of departure, we will never be able to arrive at a sustainable peace.
Yeah. Marwan, I wanted to ask you a more personal question because, as a novelist and filmmaker, it's all about personal transformation and those moments that define you as a character. Your work at the Carnegie Endowment and your book, The Second Arab Awakening, both show this deep commitment to dignity and pluralism across the region. Were there specific turning points for you, whether it's diplomatic or personal or in policy, that sharpened this commitment that you have to Palestine or your critique of occupation?
Well, I want to say a lot of things on that, Shamim. As I said, my time in Israel brought me face to face with injustice that has been done. I've always known about it. My own mother was Palestinian, coming from Jaffa, but living there and seeing the injustice on a daily basis really shaped a lot of my ideas today. The Arab world has, fought for independence 100 years or so ago, first from Ottoman rule and then from colonial rule across the Arab world. And we did achieve independence, but we never really put any effort in building institutions and in, putting together democratic rules and teaching our children that societies have to be inclusive. We are a very, very diverse society in the Arab world, ethnically, geographically, religiously, thought-wise, and yet, of course, gender. Yet we never appreciated or respected that diversity. And I have come to believe, as I said, Shamim, that without this fight for pluralism, not just fight for independence, but fight for pluralism and inclusion, we cannot hope to build an Arab world that is prosperous and stable. stability has been achieved in the Arab world through brute force until now. Basically, brute force cannot sustain stability forever. We have seen what happened in Syria as a prime example of a brutal regime that in the end could not survive because it did not, cater to the needs of its people. If I may, I don't want to digress too much, but the first, if I have to trace back the roots of my appreciating diversity, it would have to be the American University of Beirut, where I went as a young student from a very conservative society, very sheltered, and learned for the first time that truths are not absolute. People have different thoughts about everything. I've come in touch with people from across the region and beyond. We had Greeks and Turks and Afghans and Pakistan and people from the Gulf and people from Europe and America, all, in one setting. And it was the first time that I came face to face with pluralism, if you will, and got to appreciate its strength. And ever since I've been, promoting what might sound basic to many people across the world, but is not basic in our region.
Yeah.
Where we are taught to think monolithically, where allegiance is always to one person instead of the country, where different ideas are regarded as deviant at best, etc.
Yeah.
And the results, of course, are clear. We are in a region that is not doing well.
Yeah. Just as a follow-up to that, because, I've spoken to so many Palestinians, like, Hanan's family, Sandra Watfa's family, lots of people that I know personally who talk about pre-partition of Palestine. There was a much more pluralistic society in the sense that Jews, Muslims, Christians all lived together in what was, previously Palestinian territory, and there wasn't this sense of division. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, how much do you think in you talk about, yes, you have allegiance to one person, usually often in a sort of dictatorial, autocratic, or regal context. How much of that is propped up by Americans in the UK and colonialists kind of need to have somebody as a figurehead in the Middle East? Whether that is, the Assad regime or Saddam Hussein or whoever, often they've been placed there by Americans.
I mean, the birth of the Palestinian problem is because of the British colonial rule at first, which had allowed a lot of Jews to come into the country. At the turn of the 20th century, the Jews constituted only 5% of the population. By 1948, due to immigration, they became a third of the population, not more than a third of the population. But of course, the 1948 war resulted in about 750,000 Palestinians leaving their ancestral land, and only 150,000 remained. So only after 1948, the Jews became a slight majority, about 60% of the population in 1948. A huge injustice, Shamim. But I want to mention an anecdote which really affected me. When I was ambassador there, I wanted to learn about the Palestinians who remained and what kind of life did they have to endure. The Arab world called them traitors because they accepted Israeli citizenship, basically because they stayed on their land, while the people who left were looked at as heroes. I mean, a really convoluted logic there. But I visited a school, an elementary school in Nazareth, fourth grade kids. And when I entered, they rose and sang a very, very nationalistic song in Arab culture called Mawtini. Hanan knows it very well.
Yeah.
And I found meaning, true meaning in the song, maybe for the first time. This was sung by people who stayed on their land, not by us who were living comfortably and just singing it in a rather, emotional way. It left a big mark on me and um taught me what the value of resisting means, just by staying on your land. It wasn't violent resistance. It was just staying on the land and refusing to give it up.
Yeah.
Was something that was admirable to me and still is.
Yeah.
And no, absolutely. And just to follow up on the colonial issue, Marwan, you've always been clear in your interviews and writing that peace, as you said now, without justice is not really peace. But Zionism's logic, like many other settler colonial ideologies, has relied on basically erasure of land, memory, and the people. So can you just elaborate a bit more about how Palestine is part of that broader legacy of colonial domination in the region? And also, what are your thoughts on the best approach to decolonize and to continue the resistance, but also as part of a global movement, not just also, to us locally, but also as a global movement?
Look, the Zionist project of the 19th century is dying, in my view. The Zionist project promised the Jews around the world a homeland in historical Palestine, a democratic state, of course, democratic for the Jews, the Arabs were not even included, a Jewish state, a secular state, because, Judaism to Jews is a nationality rather than a religion, and a state that lives in peace. Look at the Zionist project today. Israel is no longer Jewish. Today, the number of Palestinians living in areas under Israel's control is larger than the number of Israeli Jews. 7.5 million Palestinians to 7.2 million Israeli Jews. It is increasingly not democratic. We've seen the demonstrations that have been going on for more than a year before October 7th on the nature of the Israeli democratic system, on the nature of their system of checks and balances and their judicial status. It is increasingly not secular. Today, the fringe groups that were seen as way outside the mainstream of the political system in Israel are the decision makers. People like Ben Gvir, people like Smotrich. And it's certainly not a state that lives in peace. So what is left of the Zionist project? Not much. The future of Palestine/Israel cannot be decided by the Zionist project as the Israelis want. The Israelis tried to push all the Palestinians out in 48, did not succeed. 150,000 were left, which today are 2 million people. You add to that 5.5 million Palestinians who are under occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, or Jerusalem and Gaza. And you have a situation at your hand where a minority now is ruling over a majority in what is clearly an apartheid system. Legally, you have two legal systems, separate legal systems, applied to the same group of people living either in historic Palestine or under occupation, which is the definition of apartheid. And so the best thing that Palestinians can do is to stay on their land. because that is the best way to overcome the Israeli.
And I actually, if I may jump in, Marwan, to say, you said it's less of a democracy. I don't even think it's a democracy. It pretended to be a democracy. And now the mosque is dropped and we're seeing they have different rules. If you're Jewish, which is very racist, ethnocentric way of...
It's a democracy for the Jews, which is not a democracy. So it's a selective democracy.
Exactly.
Where Arabs are totally excluded and are outside the system. This is, I mean, if we understand this, Hanan, we understand what the Israelis are trying to do. They do not want a Palestinian state because they want all the land. They do not want a Palestinian majority because, you know, they will be accused of apartheid, of course, if not already. And so their only third alternative is to kill or deport as many Palestinians as they can. That is the only alternative they feel will ensure their survival as a, you know, quote unquote Jewish state. And the Palestinian project has to be based on the fact of, like I said, staying on the land, no matter what, because that will ensure that in the long run, the international community is not going to accept an apartheid regime indefinitely. I know this is, you know, easier said than done. People are being killed and their land and homes obliterated. But that's the best thing, you know, we can do to help Palestinians is to help them stay on their land.
Marwan, in the Arab Center, you speak frankly about how Arab regimes have often paid lip service to Palestine while failing to actually do anything. And now we're seeing, in these worst of circumstances, open normalization with Israel while Gaza is literally crushed and burning. Tell us a little bit about what Arab governments have done up till now and what they're doing now to enable this impunity from Israel, and is there any way to change it?
Look, it's not even possible anymore to even talk about an Arab world. There are different words today, different Arab words. In the past, there was at least a nominal unified position on the peace process, which supported, you know, a land for peace formula. Israel withdrawing from all the land it occupied in '67 in return for peace with the whole Arab world. That land for peace formula is not respected anymore. We've seen what is called the Abrahamic Accords, a series of bilateral arrangements between some Arab countries and Israel, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Sudan, Morocco, with nothing in return. It's not a land for peace formula. And the idea was for, you know, pre-October 7, 23, the idea was that the Palestinian issue can be ignored and that peace agreements can be forged without solving the Palestinian question. October 7 changed all that, of course, and showed that the Palestinian question is central. And today, a country like Saudi Arabia covered significant ground towards a peace agreement with Israel in return for things it wanted from the United States. Today, it realizes that it cannot sign such an agreement with what is going on in Gaza. So the Palestinian question, you know, is proving itself on the table, despite the fact that much of the Arab world has tried to ignore it. I have argued in my book, Shamim, that a true Arab center cannot be a center centered on peace with Israel. That cannot be the basis, the only basis for the Arab center. That a true Arab center has to be a center for reform also, and that the Arab world can no longer ignore, addressing people's needs and problems, and ensuring stability through brute force. The Arab Spring has shown this very clearly. Arab states have argued since then that the Arab Spring is an aberration, and that things went back to normal, but they didn't. As long as the problems of the Arab world are not addressed, we're going to see successive waves of the Arab Spring. We've seen them in 2019 in Lebanon, Iraq, Algeria, and Sudan. We've seen them now. We're seeing it in Syria. Until the problems are solved, we're going to see these successive waves. So that's what I am arguing for, a center that acknowledges the need for peace, but also acknowledges the need for a just peace, but also acknowledges the need for pluralism, inclusion, and as the only way to ensure prosperity.
And I would also add that the Arab Spring was a threat to Western hegemonic, if you like, powers, because it's not about even ideology, whether it's dictators or royalty, as long as they're doing whatever the West wanted versus those who didn't. So it's just that the whole mindset has to shift, and a different, like you said, a new blueprint we needed to be implemented and well thought out. So hopefully you'll be able to.
Status quo is not sustainable, Hanan. We might not have figured out in the Arab world a way to transition from street protests to institution building. And frankly, no region in the world has figured it out in a matter of years or even decades. But the process has started. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be easy. But the point of departure is that, the status quo is not sustainable.
No, I agree. And Marwan, your family is Christian Jordanian, like, my family is Christian Palestinian, and people in the West don't even know that they're Arab Christians, even though Christianity started from our part of the world. And my dad's from Bethlehem. My mom is a Nakba survivor from 48, when their villa in West Jerusalem was given to German Jews, and the same in Haifa, their building where she was born. And this happened to 80% of Palestinians, as you were saying, in the 48 Nakba. I'm sure with Lean's family, with your mom's family from Jaffa, and so on. But the Zionist propaganda, it's really important to address it, because they keep saying, oh, we left voluntarily, or the Arab countries told us to leave temporarily. And this is just another propaganda and a lie. So, and you've never been afraid to, if you like, challenge comfortable lies. But what do you feel is the best way to dismantle this propaganda, to expose the actual violent origins of the settled colony of Israel? And why is it very important in building, or maybe you don't think it's important, but why is it important, do you think, in building a just future, if you agree, basically?
Of course, I agree. Look, this propaganda has been dismantled first by actually Israeli revisionist historians, people like Ilan Pape and Benny Morris, even though he switched later on, but they've all showed documents, records that prove that the expulsion of Palestinians was a deliberate policy by Ben Gurion and Israeli forces at the time. Since then, there are Arab historians, many of whom are Palestinians who stayed on their land, who are also debunking the Israeli narrative of that people left, voluntarily. And frankly, even if some of them left voluntarily, there is a United Nations Resolution 194 which calls for their return. So just because some people might have left voluntarily doesn't negate the right to their property and land. Let me tell you an anecdote on Arab Christians. When I was ambassador in Washington, I was giving a lecture to a Presbyterian church audience on the peace process, nothing to do with the religion. So at the end of the lecture, a guy stands up and says, Mr. Ambassador, we understand that you are of the Christian faith. Can you tell us when you converted and what effect did that have on your life? And I said, with all due respect, sir, this is a question that I need to pose to you. When did you convert? Because I'm the original Christian.
I love that.
It sounds basic, but people think Jesus Christ had blue eyes and fair hair, and it's all a Western construct.
Exactly.
We have not done enough in the Arab world to educate the West on this, frankly, and we need to do more. Jerusalem today is a city that has less than 3,000 Christians. In a generation's time, it might become a museum, the Christian home places. And that is going to hurt not just the cause of Christianity, but the cause of pluralism in our region, which, as I said, I think is essential for the region's prosperity.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And it's how it used to be for thousands of years in our area. And actually, we talked in other podcasts with other guests of how actually Jewish people thrived and were part of the Muslim and Arab world, and Christians and Jews and Muslims and so on. So actually, we need to move back to that. Very much so.
Yeah. Marwan, my family is South African Indian, so they experienced apartheid firsthand and eventually just left because of that. So I was interested to hear you talking about apartheid, and which is very much, as you said, it's even more insidious in many ways because now we have biometric checkpoints in Israel against Palestinians. There's constant surveillance, which Hanan even had a taste of, just being pulled aside to be questioned at the airport when she arrived. They knew an awful lot, a lot more about her family than she did. In your work, you talk about this illusion of reform going on under obviously severe oppression. There's clearly apartheid. There's clearly a level of dehumanization that allows this apartheid against Palestinians. And Palestinians are still very much dehumanized by Western governments and by legacy media. So why is this level of dehumanization happened? And what do you think, more importantly, is needed to change it? Can it be changed? Because in South Africa, we saw that consistent sanctions kind of economically oppressed South Africa to the point where they had to come to the table. I think that's what happened. But we're not seeing that happening here with the West. So what do you think is
I'm of the firm belief that it can and it will be changed. And I will cite three major reasons why I say that. Israel so far has portrayed itself as the only democracy in the Arab world, as the only country in the region that promotes, Judeo-Christian values, and that the rest of the region is basically subhuman. And I don't use that lightly. But things are changing. Three reasons. One is demography, as I said. For the first time in the conflict, as of a few years ago, the number of Palestinians is larger than the number of Israelis. And so Israel cannot indefinitely be a minority ruling over a majority in an apartheid manner. This might, pass today, but I'm talking about 15 or 20 years down the road, when the number of Palestinians will become maybe 60% of the population. And where, if there is no two-state solution, and I don't think there will be, the problem of apartheid will become clear to all. The second factor is the generational gap that we are witnessing all over the world. The younger you are in age, the more likely you are to support Palestinian rights. Not because the young generation understands the intricacies of the Palestinian issue, but because they understand rights. And when they see people not living under equal rights, they're uncomfortable with that, very uncomfortable with that. These people in, again, 15 years down the road will be in positions of power. I think we're already witnessing it, for example, in the Democratic Party in the United States. Today, at least 25-30% of members of Congress today, Democratic members of Congress, are willing to criticize Israel in ways they were not willing to only 10 years before. That doesn't mean that you have created a critical mass that will change policy yet. But once again, in 15 or 20 years down the road, I think things will change. And the third reason is the legal route. Arabs are not very fond of international law. They don't trust it. It hasn't served them. We have countless UN resolutions that have never been implemented on the Palestinian question. And therefore, anytime you talk about the international legal route, people are skeptical. But we're witnessing a different route in this area, which is the route of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. For the first time, we are seeing these international courts study the question and issue resolutions that are binding, which is different than most of the UN resolutions, if not all, that have been passed on the Palestinian question, which have been passed under Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter, meaning that they were not binding. Today, we are seeing resolutions that are binding. Yes, in the short term, that does not mean that Israel will necessarily abide by these decisions. But these decisions are binding not just on Israel, but also on every country that has been part of the ICC or the ICJ. And these are most of the countries of the world. And so we are seeing today countries that are thinking twice about receiving Netanyahu, for example, because he is wanted as a war criminal. All of this to say that things are not going to change overnight. I'm not naive to think that they will. But I'm very hopeful that in 15 years down the road, I'm very hopeful that we are going to see an international community that will look at this situation very different. Even what is happening in Gaza today, look at Europe. Okay, today, at least half of Europe is saying we can no longer justify that what the Israeli government is doing in bombing Gaza is part of self-defense. That is no longer a defensible argument. And you have countries like the United Kingdom and Italy and I don't want to even talk about the traditional countries that have supported the Palestinian cause, Spain, Ireland, Norway. But now they are being joined by the UK, France, Italy, and others in criticizing what has been going on. Again, it is not enough. But are things changing? I think they are.
And as you say, I mean, Gaza is definitely a slaughterhouse. It's not a war zone. It's a genocide. And what's really shocking is
it is genocide. It's a war crime.
It is a war crime. It's a war crime. And from bombed schools, people under the rubble, intentionally starving to death. And you've spoken about dignity as a foundation of peace. But the political levers, if you like, they still exist to stop the genocide of the Palestinian people. And yes, I agree. France and the UK and Canada and so on have been, I think, jumping ship recently because of the pressure and the horrible images they're seeing. But they're still not going far enough. And as a system, the global international system has failed Palestinians completely, as far as I'm concerned, because almost 2 years of a genocide and slaughterhouse is horrific. So do you think, I know you said it will change with time and hopefully the next generation, but at its core, it seems like a very weak global system or works for anyone who is maybe Israeli with their own rules, but not when it comes to Arabs and Palestinians. So why do you think the system has failed. Because to rectify it, we have to know why it's failed and its weaknesses.
Different reasons. Palestinians don't have a Judeo-Christian culture as the West does. Israel has promoted itself, as I said, as the only democracy in the region. The Holocaust has been a factor, a deterrent. People don't want to criticize anything that Israelis or Jews do because of charges of anti-Semitism, etc. But Hanan, look at the German position. Germany is the last country in the world to criticize Israel because of the Holocaust. They have this legacy of the Holocaust, and they have been reluctant, even if privately they might feel otherwise. They have been staunch supporters of Israel, for a very, very long time, since World War II. 2 days ago, the German chancellor publicly on TV said, "I can no longer justify what Israel is doing." This is a major, major shift in position. I've been dealing with the Germans for a very long time, and I know how reluctant they have been to criticize Israel. For a chancellor who is very pro-Israeli, mind you, okay, to say this is significant. Again, I don't want to be naive to say, that change is going to be quick and come easily. It's not. And unfortunately, I don't see a short-term solution to the conflict, and I think that Palestinians are going to keep suffering for a protracted period of time. But I am hopeful in the long run, because the Zionist project of establishing an ethnically pure Jewish state in historical Palestine has failed. The state is no longer Jewish, if it ever was, but it's no longer Jewish, and Israel is not going to be able to sustain, its system, or frankly, or kill 7 million Palestinians. Short of that, I think the future holds promise.
Well, good. On that promising note, certainly we've seen a lot more Jewish voices in the West, especially rejecting Zionism outright, because it's not Judaism, and I think that conflation has happened for way too long. It's definitely a political movement. It's ethno-nationalism. But I've been looking at recent polls. Recently, we all have the vast majority of Israelis living in Israel strongly support more brutality and a full genocide, starvation, and complete ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So, we talked a little bit about why this is, but I'd love to hear your perspective on what is driving that feel. And also, just looking back at your work, you were the very first ambassador from Jordan to Israel. What was that experience like for you personally? What was it always this sort of sense in the air that Palestinians should just be gone, or has that become more obvious now, or have things changed since then? How was your feeling at that time?
I was ambassador there, which, by the way, Shamim, I did not want to go. I mean, I frankly was
I remember.
kind of pushed into it. But in the end, I was representing my country in Israel. I wasn't representing Israeli interests, but Jordanian ones. Yeah. Regardless, when I went there, the Labour Party, headed by Rabin, had 40 members in the Knesset out of 120. Meretz, a very leftist party which also advocated peace, had 12 members, and the Arabs had 10. So between all these three, 62 members of the Knesset at least were at a peaceful settlement. Today, the Labour Party in Israel has 4 members. Meretz has 0 members in the Knesset, and the Arabs are split. So there is no advocacy for peace in Israel today. And once Netanyahu leaves the scene, I'm not optimistic that whoever replaces him is going to be someone who will advocate for peace. There is no constituency for peace. The Israeli society has been veering towards the right consistently and systematically for the last 30 years. And of course, October 7 has compounded this. Today, a majority of Israelis, an overwhelming majority of Israelis, do not want a two-state solution. So I recognize all these obstacles. But in the end, Israeli society, whether they're rightists or whether they're right-wing or not, will not be able to ignore the fact that amongst them are 7.5 million Palestinians, more than the number of, Israeli Jews. So that's a fact that they will not be ignored. Remember, I mean, you've said your, parents came from South Africa. South Africa put in place an apartheid system for decades, for the longest time. And I remember people said this system will never be dismantled until it was.
Mm.
Until it was. In the end, it's going to be awfully difficult for the international community to support an apartheid state.
Yeah.
I'm convinced of that. Today, they are bypassing this fact, ignoring it, by convincing themselves that a two-state solution is still possible. So what does the international community do? Just, keep advocating for a two-state solution without pairing it with a plan to implement it. It's like two people arguing over a slice of pizza while one of them is eating it.
Yeah.
Doesn't work like this. And so, despite all the obstacles that today might indicate that Palestinians will not gain their rights, I'm of the view that, as I said, in a generation's time, we are going to see something totally different.
No, I agree. But one thing, because you mentioned Arabs, and I think that's another Zionist erasure of the Palestinian identity, calling them Arabs versus Palestinians in 48. And also, I think, Marwan, the labor and all the other movements, the settlement building continued. Labor, no labor, right, Likud. I would say it's the fundamental policy and ideology of Zionism that really needs to be dismantled. At its core, it's rotten. It's a racist ideology. So it's almost, yes, left, right, here and there, but really they continued with settlements, with apartheid, and so on and so forth, and also with sort of crushing or trying to control and crush the Palestinians, whether from 48 or the rest of historic Palestine. But also we're seeing across the US and Europe people being arrested, young people, as you mentioned, who have been very vocal or sacked for saying even free Palestine. And you've also said in your writings that there can be no real reform without free speech and dignity. But this continued crackdown, and I know hopefully in the next generation, but right now it's happening and people are getting very disillusioned, disheartened. So what does this crackdown reveal about the so-called Western liberal democracies that they keep preaching about? And how can we keep Palestinian solidarity alive even under this repression, and to keep people incentivized and motivated not to give up?
To your first question, Hanan, when I advocate for equal rights, I do not mean that the Palestinian identity needs to be absorbed into the Israeli one. That's not what I meant. I mean something exactly like what happened in South Africa. The whole Jewish state, the whole Israeli state has to be dismantled and built up again by people with equal rights. Yeah. And so without that, there can be no peace in the region. I want to make that very, very clear.
No, I thought that was your view, but yeah, thank you.
The West has been, this liberal Western democracy has truly failed in its dealing with the Palestinian issue. I mean, you compare it to what happened in Russia, Ukraine. So the West justifiably, condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the taking of Ukrainian land, etc., but failed to do so when it came to the Palestinians. I mean, the two analogies are clear. And today you talk to people in the region, they've lost any trust in a Western culture that has advocated democracy to them for the longest time and failed at the first major test. There's a lot to be done if we want to regain that trust. It's not there anymore. And it's something, again, that is going to be left to the new generation, because the new generation of in the West, I mean, not just here, to basically be true to the principles they promote. But today, no one is ready to believe any talk about democracy coming from the West. No one. Yeah. And the West has frankly, in doing so, in being hypocritical about Palestine, has dealt the cause of democratic reform a blow in the region. Because now people like me who talk about democratic reform, are going to be accused to be promoting Western values that are hypocritical. So they've really hurt the process of political reform in the region a great deal.
Yeah, no, I agree. But even on the Russia front, I mean, it was very clear, a red line. You do not let NATO or the Ukraine join NATO, and it's like the Russians putting their missiles in Mexico or whatever. So they, it was like their continuation of aggression and so on. But I agree, the hypocrisy of dealing with whether it's Arabs or Ukrainians is quite baffling. Well, it's quite dehumanizing and horrific. But yeah, sorry, just to jump in.
So we've got yes, you said that democracy is better than non-democracy, but it's also democracy. Western democracy has been exposed as kind of like this neoliberal thing, which it doesn't have a good rap right now. So let's move it on. And because in your book, The Second Arab Awakening, you write that the region's failure isn't just political systems of one kind or another; it's really moral. So let's go back. I think that's what's waking people up. Who, as you say, young people don't know the nuances of every little political thing that went on necessarily, but they feel the core immorality of what's happening in front of their eyes on social media. So let's talk about reform in a moral way, I guess, that you argue that reform must be rooted in inclusion, not just PR and the semblance of inclusion. So what would real political reform look like for Palestinians, whether that's to do with dismantling Zionism or within Palestinian society as well? And how does that pluralism vision that you have apply?
Well, look, while I understand that reform under occupation is not the easiest thing in the world, but still, today the Palestinian Authority, headed by Abu Mazen, does not enjoy the support of more than 10% of the Palestinian population. Yeah. All the polls say that. So I'm not saying this in any sort of subjective manner. Reform for the Palestinians starts with two things. Elections have to be held. We don't know who represents the Palestinians today. It's certainly not Abu Mazen. We have a lot of third forces in the West Bank and Gaza that have no voice in in Palestinian organizations. We have to find a way to elect a new Palestinian government that is accountable to people. The last time elections were held were in 2006. That's a very long time ago. You talk today to any Palestinian on the street, whether in the West Bank, Gaza, or outside, No one trusts Abu Mazen. No one believes Abu Mazen represents them.
Yeah.
And when I say Abu Mazen, I don't just mean his person, but his whole, his whole organization.
Yeah.
There must be a way to unify Hamas and Fatah in some way. Not unify them, meaning that they have to agree on everything. No one does that. But to bring them together, because that Palestinian division has been detrimental to the cause of Palestinians. And three, the Palestinians need to put forward a plan, a political plan for the future that talks about inclusion, that talks about how they want to build a future society. October 7 has whole world to the misery that Palestinians are living in Gaza in particular, okay, and has done a lot to bring back the Palestinian issue to the forefront. But it's not enough. You need now to talk about a political project, not just, a military one. And you need to make use of the attention that Palestinians got from the world. You need to turn that into a political project that is based on inclusion, where all components of Palestinian society are included in a peaceful way, of course, to build a common future. This sounds utopic, this sounds romantic, maybe. Okay, I totally understand that. But we have tried everything else, Shamim, trust me, and it didn't work. Winston Churchill used to say, Americans always do the right thing after they exhaust all other possibilities. And we have exhausted all other possibilities. We have not given inclusion a chance.
And Winston Churchill is a very racist settler colonial ideologist. He's one of the worst. But Marwan, I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. But also, let's not forget the 8 million in the diaspora, Palestinians, us, who haven't voted for the PA, haven't voted for any of those so-called peace agreements, So our voices, our views are not even included, and we need to be included in the whole settlement and blueprint and sort of the future of Palestine, because I think it's very important to be inclusive of us as well as people who are living under apartheid and occupation.
This is part of the problem, Hanan, of the Oslo agreements, is they did not take into account the Palestinian diaspora. And so the diaspora felt excluded, felt they had, no stakes in this agreement. So I totally agree with you. The views of the diaspora, taking into account their needs, has to be part and parcel of any future Palestinian project.
Yeah.
That is why the two-state solution, in my view, is not also going to work. The two-state solution might address some of the needs of the people of the Palestinians under occupation, but it addresses no need for the Palestinian diaspora.
Yeah, 100%. It is a two-state illusion that they sold to everybody with no plans. But we all know that Zionism is a brutal settler colonial, ethno-supremacist, and a very ruthless apartheid ideology, if you like, and it has to be dismantled. It doesn't have a place in this 21st century. And I think we all agree that one democratic, decolonized state from the river to the sea is needed, but it needs to have reparation, full equality, as you said, and the right of return of all Palestinians. And you talked about the two-state model being dead in your work, in your writings, and here today. So the real alternative, I just want to kind of drill down in your thoughts or in your mind. How do you see that solution looking like, and how can we get there? What is needed? I know we talked about diaspora Palestinians, people there, but what are concrete measures and steps that are needed to reach that goal? And
several scenarios, several solutions have been discussed and debated in academic circles for maybe 20 years now. So we are not short of solutions. One, I mean, I don't want to appear as the advocate of one particular solution because that's really up to the two sides to determine, but I'll give you examples. You have the Swiss Federation, for example, where you have three communities who speak different languages, different cultures, but have found a way, and different numbers for each community, that have found a way to coexist under, under an umbrella called the Swiss Federation. The Belgian Federation is another example of two communities with different cultures and religion, not religion, the language, finding a way to coexist. So, whether it's a binational state, whether it's a federal arrangement, there are many, many possibilities. But they all start with one thing: an acknowledgement that the two sides have equal political, cultural, and nationalistic rights. Without that acknowledgement, we cannot arrive at a peace. Now, how to get there? There are, again, I just wrote a few months ago a piece in Foreign Affairs that should suggest a route of, taking it to the United Nations, maybe have a negotiating process to agree to dismantle all laws that discriminate against Palestinians in particular. And once that is done in a couple of years, then you can negotiate a settlement where the end result is predetermined, which is ending the occupation. You cannot talk about a solution without ending the occupation. So I don't want to go into all the details. They're available in my foreign affairs. But all I want to say, Hanan, is that what I'm advocating is not new. It's being talked about and has been talked about for many, many years. But of course, in academic circles, it hasn't yet reached the political sphere, because in the political sphere, people don't want to face the facts. Countries don't want to face the facts because they don't want to say the two-state solution is dead. If they say that, they will be forced to say what is the alternative, and nobody wants to talk about, equal rights or one state, etc. So they find it easy just to dodge the path. But this is going to be, again, a process that will unfold over time. It's not going to be a process that will be internalized by both communities today. Today, you talk to Palestinians, they don't want to even hear the word Israeli. You talk to Israelis, it's the same. So a solution is not possible, and I'm convinced of that. We won't see any short-term solution to the problem. This is going to take a generation at least. But is there a solution in a generation's time? I think so.
And as you said, now everybody's rushing to say, oh, let's recognize Palestine as a state, but they want us to accept a crummy 22% of historic Palestine. That's never going to be viable. Nobody's going to accept it.
Yeah. Well, that's an enforced situation anyway. But Marwan, we talked about the morality and this feeling of justice that people have. And it's really nice to hear somebody who's so politically savvy having a very positive look at this, because there are times when we wake up and it just feels very dire. So what advice do you have for activists, all of us just on the street doing our little bits, trying to make a real difference to the worldview? And I think the fact that people have continued to agitate about Palestine is making a difference. What should people do to feel like they're having an impact?
Challenging the Israeli narrative, and that's being done. Look at what is happening in universities across the world. These are not your riffraff revolutionaries, as they have been accused of by the Trump administration or by whoever. These are the creme de la creme. These are the people in the best universities in the West that are calling for Palestinian rights. That gives me a lot of hope. And what we have seen time and again, that they are not accepting all the restrictions placed on them by the Trump administration or otherwise. I was just looking at the Harvard graduation yesterday, and
Amazing.
students are defiant. Even the president of the university is defiant. Uh, so keep on challenging the status quo across the world. To the Palestinians, you know, we need, and I can't keep saying stay on their land without also us helping them stay on their land because they're going through impossible conditions. But staying on their land is a crucial part of a future Palestinian state where Palestinians are the majority, not otherwise.
Yeah.
So again, pessimistic in the short term, but very optimistic in the long run.
That's great. I don't know if you've heard, Marwan, but alternative media, you know how they said Genocide Joe, now they're calling Trump Death Camp Donald. I don't know if you've heard that, but I've heard it a few times now. Yeah.
Well,
Look, like I said, the Israeli narrative is just not holding.
Yeah.
Okay, it's taking time. Yes, it's slow. Yes, but it's just simply not holding. After 2 years almost of the war on Gaza, it is clear that there are no more any military objectives. Hamas has almost run out of ammunition and arms anyway. Nobody stocks for 2 years. Nobody. And so it is clear that what the Israelis are doing is simply to drive Palestinians out of their land, to kill as many of them as possible, and try to deport the rest. It is clear, and I think the West is coming to realize this fact slowly but surely. In my view.
Marwan, we'll link to your work in the show notes. But are there any current projects or campaigns or anything that you would like our listeners and viewers to follow or support, other than buying your books, which everybody should do?
Look, I've worked mainly on two issues that I'm very passionate about. The need for a just solution to the Palestinian problem is one, and the need for political reform in the Arab world is another. And almost all my writings are about these two issues. My two books are about these two issues. The first one was devoted largely to peace efforts, the second one to pluralistic and reform issues. We are delving at Carnegie into new areas that have not been at the center of the radar screen of the Arab world for a long time, like climate, for example, change. Climate is going to affect the region in a major way. By 2050, the region might not even exist if nothing serious is done about reducing carbon emissions, etc. So we're doing work on that. We consistently try to ask questions, not accept what is being presented in the region as the solution to everything. We consistently try to analyze the issues objectively with facts and make the point, as I said, that the future of the region lies with pluralism, diversity, and inclusion, and cannot be based on stability through brute force.
Exactly what Trump doesn't want. But these are great words. And Marwan, before we wrap our Enlightenment podcast, is there a certain message that you'd like to leave with our listeners and viewers about the importance of standing in solidarity with Palestine? Anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share?
All I can say to the international community is keep doing what they are doing. They're doing a great job, frankly. Keep challenging the status quo forces. and have faith. We will get there. I'm very hopeful about the legal route that I talked about. I think with time it's going to be more difficult for Israel or other countries to ignore the rulings of both courts, and so keep the faith is what I would say.
I love that.
I love
Faith
that.
that is based on action, not just
Yeah.
not on prayer, but on action.
On action.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to finish. So, we'll wrap it up there, and I'll leave you with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr., who said, quote, "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." So if you are out there doing whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. And it is our collective responsibility to speak out against injustice and suppression. If you've enjoyed today's episode, one of the things you could do is share it with just one or two other people, subscribe, because your engagement really helps us to amplify voices grounded in humanism and to continue what we hope is enlightened activism. Marwan, thank you so much for joining us today, for your courage and your invaluable insights. Really, it was wonderful to hear things from your perspective and for your solidarity with Palestine.
Thank you both for what you are doing, and again, keep doing what you are doing also. You're doing the world a great favor.
Tislam, thank you. And just to add to my wrap up, stories and representation matter. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, take action. As Marwan just said, don't just pray, but take action as well. You can pray as well. Our collective power is the way forward. In solidarity, see you next time. Marwan, shukran. Thank you for all that you do for Palestine and in general and for the Arab world and inclusiveness. And also love to Lean, and thank you for today.
Thank you. Great to see you both.